in most of the businesses is very close to like a romance, right? Uh, Very close to like a romantic relationship, and you're trying to get people to be excited about what they're doing to get them in the door in the first place. And then you decide to immediately afterwards say, and screw you. Work is work. It should be hard.
A lot of software engineers haven't got involved in open source, haven't got involved in events. So what does it mean to be involved in an event? What does that typically involve doing that your average software engineer is not familiar with?
You get to exercise all the parts that are traditionally considered soft skills that everyone doesn't think as super valuable, and except for the part that, they tend to actually make all the things work. They bring all the people to wherever, whatever it is you're doing. If it's a business, you're bringing in customers, interacting with the customers, and if it's an event, for like the grants committee specifically, we were reviewing grants that people were asking for in order to attend the event. So you could call it a scholarship instead. They called it grants, and we set up a process inside of the group to try to minimize as much bias as possible. So we were doing blind reviews of the actual proposals, and then had a couple of different people cross-checking each one of them. So I think we had like a group of like 10 people involved in that one in particular, the couple of years I was there. So that's what that looked like. I realize it's a super high level that I just described it at. But that particular event is very unusual for even having that in the first place. Most of them don't have any kind of grants proposal process like that to apply for money to be able to go to the event.
So that was for people to attend the event then, rather than speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It was speakers or attendees. There was a preference given, of course, to the speakers if they needed some additional assistance that way, because if I recall correctly, we didn't actually pay in the speakers. So it was entirely, any of the non-keynote speakers. So only any of the track speakers.
Yeah, it's always a trouble for a small event, isn't it? Trying to find that balance of getting good speakers, but you haven't got the funds to pay them, but you need to acknowledge they've got costs, and it is difficult to do this. There's a time involvement, and you are imposing on them to speak. Cool. You've also been involved in a Python Software Foundation then.
Yes. That was its own little journey off to the side. I was at, I think, a Python Software Foundation, like members, like dinner or something like that. So yeah, if you paid dues to actually be a member of the Python Software Foundation, it may have been considered a donation. I don't remember exactly, but I paid money at one point in time to the PSF, and I got invited to a dinner. And while hanging out there, I was talking to different people, and one of the people was like, "Oh yeah, I'm the chair of the trademark committee." I'm like, "I'm sorry." And he's like, "Do you want to be on the committee too?" I'm like, "Do I have to?" And he's like, "Do you know anything about trademarks?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like,
Why
"Cool."
did you like that?
Cool. Can I drag you out to that too? So, David is his first name, and I've only since that singular event did I interact with him at all. Any other way was only email. Was my only main point of interaction. So last name was, I believe, Mertz. Both he and I stopped being as actively involved in that in the past couple of years. I guess I have a fondness for smaller organizations doing work that's a little bit more direct and impactful, and the size of the PSF has like grown at this point in time that there's actually a lot of people involved there. I was just sort of like, I'm not getting paid for this, I'm a volunteer, and everyone was like, seemed like it was formalizing a little bit more than I wanted it to be formalized.
Okay, cool. So not many software engineers will claim to know anything about trademarks.
Yeah.
How did that come about? How
Oh, no.
trademark knowledge become part of your staple?
So this gets into my weird path into software engineering at all. So I learned how to code before I learned algebra. And that was like somewhere like 10, 11 years old. And I wanted to go to college to be a software developer because at the time I wanted to make video games as a teenager. Who doesn't want to make video games as a teenager?
Yep, true.
And my uncle and my dad talked me out of it and said, oh, what you should do is, my dad in particular was like, you should become this thing called an actuary. And you should go to some place where you can do actuarial science. So I'm like, okay, Dad. So I did that. I did that for a little less than 1 year. I could do the math just fine, but I was bored to tears. So I switched to being an English major. And then I graduated as an English major in 2009. And I was like, oh, crap. There are no jobs because it's 2008, 2009 financial crisis. Everything was like in a gigantic downturn. So I do the logical thing and extend my education. And in my extended education, I went for a master's of business. So I got myself that little MBA, and I was teaching at the same time freshman English. All right, I'm getting to the trademark stuff, I promise. So my minor was business, and I had already taken a bunch of business law at that point in time in the undergraduate. And in my master's, I got to sort of like skip out of it because the person that I was going to teach it said, well, you're planning on becoming a lawyer anyhow, because that was at my career path at that point in time that I thought I was going to be. And I thought I was specifically wanting to work on becoming a patent attorney. And I looked into each of the different pieces of law at that point in time, copyright, trademark, and patent, to try to figure out the details of each one of them. And in all that work of working with that professor, I learned a lot of different details of each of the laws and how it like works in different parts of the US versus the rest of the world, and all the different mechanics of how that works. So I unfortunately know too much about a lot of that.
That's a lot of effort to go to avoid studying computer science.
It was. And I had everyone else that was in the graduate degree program was, I had someone in the same office as me that was like also teaching undergraduates. He was teaching Greek. I don't remember what kind of doctorate he was working on. There was a person who was a psychologist, and he had a doctorate in psychology. And there's several other different people, and they all were teaching at the same college as me, and they were all working on these advanced degrees in other fields, and they all now work in technology. All three of us, there's actually more of us that I could think through if I wanted to, and all 5 of us, we all do programming of some kind. So it was a weird cohort.
Yeah, I think that's also fairly typical of that period post 2010 as the recovery started happening after the financial crisis. In that we did pull an awful lot of people into tech, and tech grew very, very quickly after that for about the next 10 years. And you say, pulled a lot of people in. That maybe is a nice point to segue into. You and I have both posted on LinkedIn recently about onboarding and the importance of getting onboarding right and getting people effective on a team quickly. What are your thoughts on onboarding and how important it is?
So I see onboarding as critical in 2 ways. I see onboarding as this special little period of time that you get with a person in which they get to both learn your company, but also learn how like things work behind the scenes. And it's where they get level set about how hard things are here. and if it's things are very hard to get work done, because while they're learning it, they're also having to do lots of discovery, basically. Then they're actively learning a second thing, which is the engineering culture and the degree to which everyone else cares about what they're doing inside the company. And so, in my view, it's not just about, it is about feel good, right? It's a fact, if you were going to try to measure it, it's like, oh, time to first value of a person being hired, how quickly are they actually making meaningful impact? That would be a way to measure it, of like, how quickly are they taking tickets that people have defined and then actually impacting it. That would be a way to actually like measure it. But like, to me, the more important two things are like the degree to which the organization demonstrates care to them, and then the degree to which the other engineers display care to each other.
Yeah, it's something that I think far too many teams and organizations get wrong. It seems to become this kind of accepted belief in a lot of places that it's normal for an engineer to take 6 or 12 months to start, adding some impactful value to a
That's
team.
insane. At Pantheon, I was one of those people that was measuring. I think is it Gergely? Is that his name? The pragmatic engineer.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I've always struggled with the pronunciation of his name, so run at it with me again. How do you say it?
I believe it's Gergely.
Gergely? Okay. All right. We'll go with that. Or we could just call him the pragmatic engineer. So he has a thing that he's involved in called, I think, DX. They're a software product. I think they're meant to measure like DX in general, developer experience in general. And I was running those kinds of things at Pantheon by hand with Google Forms. And I actually was measuring on a quarterly basis shortly after I started. And one of my main questions on there is like, how long did it take for your first meaningful commit to go out to production? And I had to say meaningful because the company had an early policy to everyone on their first day make a commit, and that a commit was a small meaningless commit. It like adds your name to a list somewhere that's in some sort of web service that doesn't do anything else other than it has your name in it. So first meaningful commit. And one of the things that I remember calling out at the time was like, we had like tripled the size of our engineering organization, and our time to first meaningful commit had also tripled. It went from like a week to 3 weeks. Now, this was all self-reported, right? Not like gathered by hand, but you could feel it in the organization in two ways. One was people didn't know where to find stuff just at all, right? And the documentation that was so carefully made by the early crew that was made sure that everything meaningfully happened inside of a week. All those people were being spread thin across the entire org to try to just keep up with all these new people coming on board. So I see it as one of those things that measures the degree to which if you say 6 to 12 months to onboard to first commit, then you're saying that you're willing as an organization, multiply however many engineers you have. If you have 100 engineers, you're willing on a permanent basis, if you're just saying, hey, whenever someone turns over, average tenure for someone's 2 years. So I'll say 50% of the people turning over. So let's see, 25% in year one, 100 people, 25 people out of those 100 people turned over that year, and 6 months, whatever their salary is, will be generous and say they make 200K USD. And so you're saying you're willing to throw away 100K USD times 25 people, so $2.5 million a year, just because you don't care about making it easier for people to get their work done, which is insane.
It is, but it's quite normal. I mean, just over a year ago, I left my last permanent employment, and I was there for 8 months. And one of the reasons I left is I did very little productive in that time. I mean, I spent the first month trying to actually get a laptop and permission to access most of the systems. And I found that infuriating. I want to be doing something productive. I can't do anything. It was very very, very frustrating. And it's not the first time. I joined another organization a couple of years ago, and my first day, I had a laptop, no way of logging on, no connections, no information how to connect to anything, and I didn't even have contact details of the person I was reporting to, the CTO. I had to track them down. And then when I did get hold of them, I'm like, oh, I thought you started in 2 weeks' time. I haven't thought about what to do yet.
Oh.
So you've got that honeymoon period when you're bringing people on where you can create a great impression and set everything up for success, or you can just make it look very, very blasé and casual and disorganized, and burn that new enthusiasm you have from somebody that's joining.
Yeah.
And if you drag it out to 8 months, they get frustrated and leave and go and do something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Someone told me once upon a time that when new people come into your organization, the honeymoon analogy you gave right there is like perfect, because new people coming in you've convinced them in many ways to leave whatever they were doing before or to choose you among everyone else. And that relationship is the way that it's like worked out in most of the businesses is very close to like a romance, right? Very close to like a romantic relationship. And you're trying to get people to be excited about what they're doing to get them in the door in the first place. And then you decide to immediately afterwards say, and screw you. Work is work. It should be hard.
Yeah, and it's crazy because day one is when they're most enthusiastic. They've made that commitment, and take the analogy of a romantic relationship. It's the beginning of the relationship. It's the exciting phase. It's when they're most committed, most wanting to see what it's all about, throw themselves into it, and then you just immediately destroy all that goodwill, all that excitement you've got, and they're never going to have the same engagement and enthusiasm as those first few weeks. So it's crazy how many organizations throw it away to me.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I think it's very hard to keep as you scale up an organization, that same kind of thing. I don't know that it's impossible to go do it beyond 100 people. I just haven't seen it. Right? I think it might be that a certain size that people stop. I don't know. This gets into like a whole theory of like anthropology and things like that I can't easily defend. But there's like those numbers where people say like beyond a certain number, it's like a tribe or whatever like that, then it's very hard for you to have empathy for that many people. I think at some level or another, to head up an engineering organization, you have to be a little bit of a sociopath. And that means you lack empathy in some basic way, or not you lack empathy. What's a better way of saying that? Empathy is something that you can turn on and off. And it's not something that's like automatic for you to care about other people that same way.
So I hadn't thought about that before, but I think I'm inclined to agree with you that at a certain level of leadership, you probably do have to have that, because at a certain level, you have to make choices of, do I do what I think is right for that individual, or do I do what's right for the organization?
Mm-hmm.
And what's right for the organization might be best for most of the employees. Most people still have a job. But for these people that I'm going to let go, it's devastating for them potentially. It's absolutely terrible. And having been through that choice in a small business where I had to choose who was going to get made redundant, which roles were going to go, it was horrible to be sat there thinking, well, we can afford to do without these roles, so that means that those people are going to be out of a job. To a certain extent, you have to try and turn off that empathy, because otherwise, well, I found it too much after I had to make people redundant the second time. I'd had enough. When I faced a prospect to do it the third time, it was, no, I'm out of here. I'm going long before I have to do that again. So I think you probably do at a certain level have to be able to turn that off. And I've laid off 2 people each time. If you're doing that to several thousand people, you probably do have to just not think of them as people and turn off that empathy. And I don't want to be in that kind of position, and I don't want to be like that. I think I'd rather stick in a small startup and have that responsibility in an organization that's much smaller, and hopefully make it a success, so I'm never in that position again.
Yeah. I think I have my other slightly controversial view that I'll go ahead and stack on here, while at the same time, is like, um, I learned pretty early on into management. Once I like transitioned from being a software engineer into management, I was working at a consultancy called Worthwhile. That's one of the things that is like necessary. It doesn't feel good, but it's not just good for the rest of the organization, but actually the person. Um, there's been a handful of people that I've had to let go for bad performance over time, and the way in which I try to let people go is such that they'll take my call again in another year, which is not usual, I think, for most engineering leaders. I think they usually prefer to just kick it over to HR and never talk to the person again. They're dead to them. But I've actually like followed through on that. Let's see, of the people that I've let go, I've not reached out to every single one of them, but I've reached out to many of them, and all of them have taken my call, or LinkedIn DM or whatever it is, right? And I bring that up only to say that many times they need to, if it's not like a layoff, right? They need to be let go in order for them to do what they actually need to be doing in their career. Like, I think there's a way to do it if you're like close enough down to the people, but I think at a certain size of an organization, where you are just treating them as just numbers on a spreadsheet and making arbitrary decisions, like at the cut 20%, it's probably way easier to sleep at night if it doesn't impact you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to circle back to the onboarding there. So I did a contract for a large organization about 7 years ago now. And all right, not to pick on the poor IT department, they were a bit struggling to find laptops at the time, so it took a little bit of time to get a laptop. And the manager I was reporting to in the contract wasn't the best with his timekeeping, so even though I was told to lock up at 10 o'clock to make a start, he still managed to be an hour late. But apart from that, when I got a laptop through IT and managed to actually find the team I was going to work with by about 1 o'clock, the team were beautifully prepared. So I sat down with a laptop I could just about log into at 1 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, we'd push the first commit to pod.
Nice.
And they were all ready and well organized. And that's an organization of 5,000-6,000 people, I think. So it can be done, but I think, it has to be the commitment from a team that's going to be ready and that are going to take this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that holds across every part of many organizations.
Yeah, totally agree. I remember once being asked, how do you know if your organization cares, your engineering organization cares? And my answer was basically onboarding documentation. It is your initial message to the next team member, right? And it's just there's the default stance of all the other people that you're working with, all the other employees. They're the ones who fundamentally have to contribute to that. All the other engineers have to contribute to that to make it good. The manager just can't do it unto themselves. The tech lead just can't do it unto themselves. They don't have all the necessary information.
Yeah, and I guess it also means that you've created a simple enough set of processes that you can document it, explain to it, and give it to somebody new. Mm-hmm. You don't turn up and go, well, we've got this on this cloud, and we've got this on that one, and we do this in this language, and this in that language, and we use this build tool over here, and that build tool over here. If you've got 97 different programming languages and tools and setups, then it's a mess and uncoordinated, and it'd be very difficult. Well, if you've got it all very standardized, very clear, you've got to have clear coding conventions, clear processes, they're a lot easier to document. So again, you've probably had that sense of ownership, that sense of purpose, that sense of we're going to make this maintainable and supportable, and we're going to make our lives easy to be in the position to do that.
We're going to make it boring.
Yes, in the light way.
Yeah.
Yes, in the light way. So you can spend the time doing the interesting things of solving the problems, not putting out fires. Yes, I like that approach. So on controversial topics then.
Sure.
Let's talk about 10x engineers. What's your view on a 10x engineer?
They don't exist as the way that most people talk about them. most people are wrong. There's not a person out there who does 10x as much valuable output. They might output 10x the number of lines of code. They're just typing that fast. And now with AI, they can strap on this jetpack and go faster because they can let the other thing type for them, right? They can output lots of stuff, but sheer output of number of lines of code or pull requests or anything else like that does not a Rockstar or 10x make. It is, but that's the general idea, right? Of like, they are so brilliant and so wonderful that you have to be very careful to keep their fragile egos around and keep them away from people who aren't as nearly as smart as they are, right? And you let them loose and they'll just solve wondrous things. The people that you do have that do something that seems like that, it's a simulacrum of the actual thing, they're really good at making lots of tech debt really fast, right? That no one else knows how to maintain because they don't want to explain things to anyone else. And they're honestly just a jerk, right? They're a brilliant jerk. They do have, higher than average intelligence, right? They are that, but you're not going to be able to reap the rewards that you think you are by hiring a pack of those people into an organization.
Cool. I have two different views to that.
Sure.
One, I think, and I should have grabbed the book before because it's just sat somewhere on my shoulder. I think the original 10x thing came from some actual data. And it's misquoted because I think, if I remember rightly, the actual data was that the best programmers are 2x better than the average programmer and 10x better than the worst. So I think that gets misquoted or misrepresented a lot. So that's kind of all that anybody remembered was the 10x, and not that it's 2x versus the average and 10x versus the worst. And when you think about that logically, there's in everything that people do, or pretty much everything in life, there is that distribution from good to bad, I guess left-handed to right-handed people, whatever distribution you want. There's normally the standard distribution, hence why it's called the standard distribution. So I can imagine there is quite a big gap between the best and the worst. And personally, I have a story that illustrates that. Going back several years, I can point to some data that I was a 50x engineer in this period of time.
Sure.
And the point I want to make about that is not that I was wonderful. I just did something that I know. Building actually an API in Flask, given we're talking about that earlier. I did something I know that I've done before. So I spent some time doing it. A year after I'd done the first version, we needed to do some updates in the team. And it was a good idea for somebody else to do that and not have it that I'm the only person in the team that knows how that bit works. It's kind of crazy. So somebody else was going to take on that work. 153 hours they spent on that work and didn't get it done. So it was now getting desperate. So I picked it up and did the work in 3 hours. So, there's the data. I was 50x more effective. But it's not that, I'm somehow better or genius or any of that. They just refused to go and learn something they didn't know. They didn't come and ask for my help or help from somebody else on the team that could have helped. Or even, don't know what they did. They just simply didn't engage with the problem and reach out. And this is a team that did a lot of pair programming, a lot of collaborating. So they must have almost worked hard not to engage, not to learn that, not to take those opportunities. And as I got to know this person a bit better, it was a repeated pattern. They were underperforming. So I can imagine that there is that big distribution between even average, which I put myself at, and the worst. And sometimes it's free choice because we don't, and you mentioned this earlier, the soft skills. People don't choose to collaborate, and software engineering is a team sport. If you choose to go out on your own and struggle on your own and not make use of your team, you can put yourself into being, I guess, the inverse of 10x, 1/10 of a performer.
Yes.
By not leveraging your team, not working with them, not collaborating. So I think that's another aspect that sometimes we forget when we kind of get upset about the rockstar image. We forget that there's the other side, that If we don't use our teammates, we don't use these processes, we don't use these procedures, we can, in a way, choose to make ourselves less productive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an entirely valid framing. When I write about the 10x engineers, usually what I write is that the true 10x engineer is one that levels up everyone else around them on a constant basis just by their sort of like sheer presence. They don't make themselves 10x more productive. They try to increase their impact around them, right? Beyond themselves. So what's more impactful than one person doing work? 10 people doing work, right?
Yeah, and if you can make everyone on that team twice as productive, by sharing your knowledge, by removing frictions for the team, you're always going to have far bigger impact.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree with that. I will also agree with the framing of that there's a distribution of people, and some people are Olympic athletes in this niche, right? They are very good at it. But since software engineering is a team sport, fundamentally, if you aren't good with the people side of things, if you're bad on those soft skills, you will fundamentally perform as if you're like, a 1/10th engineer, even if you are very high skilled and actually like typing things out fast and knowing algorithms and then knowing software patterns and knowing a lot, right? Knowing a lot and then being able to demonstrate it is entirely different from being able to do it on a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to my example, that was a very, very small instance. If we'd been building that with Django Rest or building it in Rust, something that I wasn't familiar with, I wouldn't necessarily have been that much faster. I probably would, because I'd have gone and asked for help rather than struggling on my own, which I think is the big difference that really stood out there. Which is back to that, it's the soft skills, it's a team effort. We can be far more predictive by, when we know more, level up the people around us, and when we are stuck, leverage the knowledge and the help of the people around us.
Yeah. I'm actually curious about a thing here. What has been one of the most effective things that you've seen to actually spread that knowledge around? Because I've seen different organizations do different things, and I'll elaborate on what I mean here in a second to spread it around. Because like you can do it with docs. That's one way. You can write it down. That's great. But once you do get to 100 engineers, there's a stuff that's on the edge of just happening. The stuff that's happening right now of like, oh, we're about to change this thing. And there's two teams that are about to change something they're about to collide into each other. I've seen architectural review boards. I've seen like ADRs, and I've seen a bunch of other different things like that. But it's like fundamentally a human organization problem and a soft skill problem. What have you seen there that's been effective?
I think when you're getting to, getting it across 100 people, you're dealing with multiple teams. What I've seen work best is when there's groups of interest and people going to a talk, people sharing a talk. So lunchtime talk, say, one organization, we had a regular series on C++ because most people are working in C++. So that was providing some chance of different teams to get together, meet, and present a talk, hear a talk, and share that knowledge. Some of the other things I've seen in some of the big organizations that work quite well have been internal forums, internal chat forums where they could go and share knowledge. And generally having enough people active in those, sharing that knowledge and a very good code of conduct had kept enough people engaged. Again, it was paired with those kind of talks that were happening, so that was sharing the knowledge and having enough people have that face-to-face relationship, so it wasn't another chat forum that becomes very, shall we say, like Reddit. It was more engaged where people knew the person they were speaking to, and if they really wanted to get into depth, they could get up and walk to the floor of the building that they were in and go and talk to them in person. I haven't seen that working as well in a fully remote company of that size, if I'm really honest. I think you can build a successful fully remote organization. I haven't experienced one of that size that is successful. I think that's because all the ones of that size that I worked for were office-based and then transitioned, so didn't have the culture, didn't have the right environment, and still had too many ways of working that reflected being in the office, or too many little cliques that had formed when people were in the office together and then weren't making that effort to involve outsiders in them.
Gotcha. Yeah, I ask only because it's one of those things that I've been curious about over time. I've seen only three things. I've seen a group of people whose title is architect, and they decide everything, and they let everyone else know what's decided, and that's terrible, and I hate that. Then there's the thing that you described. That's a little bit closer. Like there's some sort of like committee with like people that are rotating around. People ask for approval on things, or they give talks at some sort of like shared common thing. It's like a slightly more informal process, and just mostly a rubber stamp to like, yes, you shared it with everyone, right? And then there's the I write everything down. The process is king, and you write things down and Git repo somewhere, ADRs. An IETF sort of like RFC process where there's like these amendments and everything else like that. And there's a group of people, but they're mostly just running the process as opposed to being the process. So yeah, cool. Just curious.
Yeah, I have been one of those architects and been part of that process, and I've found it pretty much a waste of time because it became a process for the sake of a process, and I don't really believe in the people not doing the work having something dictated from on high.
Yeah, those with dirty hands are the right people to make the decisions about the problem, and those with clean hands are wrong.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of balance there, because the other problem I saw there is that the people with dirty hands, in your analogy, were also prone to, oh, shiny toy. We're going to go and use all these shiny toys because we want it. So I think what they needed, and what was a better approach, was to have them have to explain what they're going to use to somebody else and have that challenged. So not be told, thou shalt do this, but be, okay, you're going to use that new shiny toy. How do we know it's the right toy? How do we know that it's going to work? How do we know it's better than what you have now? What validation have you done? How do we know it's going to be supported? What are the costs? You're coming here asserting it's going to scale better than what your current solution is. On what basis? What have we done to validate that? So I think it needed some of that, but again, my experience of it most recently, that wasn't there.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. You mentioned transitioning then from your career's been quite interesting, different, and a lot of work to avoid a computer science degree. And you've transitioned into management then. So what was it like transitioning to management?
I've transitioned in and out of management now several times. Okay. That's my bad answer, but go ahead.
So the first time is probably the most eye-opening because you've got an idea of what you're getting into after that. So what was the biggest learning? What was the most surprising thing for you with becoming a manager?
I was accustomed to the most important thing that I did each day was do the tasks that someone else said I need to be done, right? Or to advocate about what I should be doing next. But it's like very me focused, right? And the thing that I didn't realize is like how if you continue with that pattern, it very quickly meant you were sort of starving all the people reporting to you for things to work on. I think that was the most direct and obvious one. Like, oh, crap. I have a bunch of people who are now dependent upon me of what they should be doing next. And I knew it with like head knowledge, right? I knew it like that was going to happen. But I'm talking experientially here of the degree to which I was not prepared for that. I thought I was pretty good at writing things down, right? Because everyone always told me that I was good at writing things down as like a senior individual contributor. And I was the person who would document things, processes, document the APIs, push for automatic generation of API, documentation, all that stuff, push for good, clear requirements. And then suddenly the shoe was on the other foot, and I was the person who was needing to generate all these things and be like, many times in the moment being like, I actually don't know what the right answer is for what you should do. And I want to give enough direction about what you should do, but also be willing to be wrong enough in the same message at the same time. And also do that over and over and over again for all these different things and decrease and increase the scope of direction on each one of them. Of like, no, actually I need to be exactly this. Or push back and like you have lots of freedom on this and provide that clarity constantly.
And is there anything about the transition to management that's caught you out, or one of those things that's nobody ever advertises?
Good question. I'm having to ponder it here for several seconds. I am going to be weird and say that the MBA program that I went through actually like covered enough stuff that I wasn't too surprised. I'm going to be that terrible person that says, I learned something from my MBA program. I'm trying to think if there was anything that completely surprised me, though. In your own words, like called me out. And I'm struggling here.
Let me give you an example.
Sure.
And we'll come back to the MBAs. Because, when I talked about management and when people first, talked to me about leading people, I thought, it would be about technical leadership, processes and procedures, promotion. I don't remember anybody ever telling me I'd have to take somebody aside and talk to them about their drinking, or take somebody aside and talk to them about their personal hygiene, and that had complaints that they smelled and people didn't want to sit near them in the office. Those are the kind of things that were,
I had an HR program that actually covered all that stuff. I'm not joking. So go ahead, continue though.
Okay. I was going to say, I've not heard of an MBA program covering all that kind of stuff.
I won't share the exact story, but yeah, I had a person who led the HR program talk about the kinds of challenges, and like one of them was like those things were covered, alcohol and other kinds of stuff like that, and like what you should do to be both in the law but also like to point them in the right direction beforehand. I thought that people actually knew what they wanted as you went up in the hierarchy, that like there was this information that was being for some reason not relayed to me, right? And someone was being a bad message delivery person. But many times I was just surprised by the degree to which people would claim this was all like rational of whatever they're wanting, but actually it was mostly emotional. That was the thing that caught me off. The degree to which that these changes were entirely based off of the last article a person read, he has a C in front of his name, something, a C in front of his title. Doesn't matter what the title was. I'm not picking on CEOs here. It could have been the CTO. It could have been the CFO. Any of them, right? They read something and they decided that this was the most important thing for their organization to change. And to realize that that's normal, actually, it is, we don't realize the degree to which that we are driven by emotional, wanting to keep up with the Joneses, or wanting to not fall too far behind, or something else, right? There's the degree to which that's just pervasive, and it's actually not a problem.
Yep, that's very true, and that's something I've seen many times where the CEO. I will pick on a CEO because I've got a couple of examples of CEOs in an organization that did this. On Monday, it's this thing. On Tuesday, after they've read something else, it's this thing. And on Wednesday, we talk to another customer, and now it's this thing. And yeah, very, very much emotionally driven. Although I'm going to flip it on you. In my MBA, I studied behavioral economics and behavioral finance. And after that, I realized that nothing's rational. People are completely irrational in most things we do. So it didn't surprise me at all. So on that note, let's wrap up. MBA as a tool or a learning process for software engineering leaders. What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't recommend it to most people. I think it's too long and too much money. I think if you get into a management path, you're not going to be harmed by it. I think if you go off and have no experience and learn everything from an MBA and think you know everything, it's a terrible life choice. So, MBA, if you have hubris with it, it's of course bad. But that's true of anything, if you have hubris with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally think if you're at middle management, it's not worth it, as you say. If you're going into executive level and you're starting to deal with the rest of the business and starting to think about, strategy, finance, and understanding the rest of that, then I think it's good to have that broad knowledge. and be more aware of what your colleagues in marketing, what your colleagues in finance and so on are doing. And maybe if you're going to go into consulting as well, board level advice stuff, it could be particularly useful.
Yeah. It's very useful to have an idea of what the other people are at that level doing. Why do they even exist?
Yeah.
Most organizations have an opinion that their little slice of it runs the entire company, when that's a lie. Right?
Yeah, it's both true and a lie, isn't it? And it's like, finance will think they run the entire company when, tech will argue that we need tech, and operations will argue we need that, and sales will argue we need that. And they're all right and they're all wrong.
Yeah. They all need to work together. If any of them are missing, whatever one is doing the worst is a constraint on the others.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right, Robert. Thank you very much for your time. Any final thoughts you want to share?
No final thoughts. It was a delightful chat. Happy to do it again sometime if you'd like.
All right, cool. That'd be great.